What happened was...
Hey friends, it's so nice to see you. It's today, the time is now. You are here and the weather is outside your window.
Hailing from the rural hills of Maroontown in the parish of St. James, Jamaica, today's guest is a virtuosic pianist and phenomenal composer whose compositions have been performed all over the world. Please welcome to the show, Mikhail Johnson.
Hello.
Zach, hi, how is it going?
Good, how are you? Nice to see you.
I'm well, thank you so much. Good to see you as well.
Yeah, where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Steilacoom, Washington.
Amazing.
Yes, it's
Wow.
gorgeous outside. I'm right up at the beachfront.
Oh my goodness.
Just really taking in the glorious, snow-capped mountains on the horizon. So it's really, 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 really fabulous.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Oh my goodness. Well, it's so nice to finally connect.
Yes, it is. We've been talking online for quite a while, but I mean, just
very
like
long
looking
time.
at all the amazing things that you've been doing so far, and it was just like such a great honor to finally, get to speak with you in person.
Oh, well, likewise. I'm a huge fan. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So you're an incredibly brilliant pianist. And what I need to know is, how did you discover piano? When did this happen? And tell me about your journey.
I have a feeling that piano discovered me.
Oh.
Because, well, the whole idea with the classical music thing, my mom told me the story that, she normally listened to this TV station on like Sunday afternoons while she was working in the house, just cleaning up, getting ready for the week. And this particular week, she was just not having it. She was like, I want to listen to something else. And little did she know that when she changed the station, I started to cry, and she over time discovered that was actually, I like classical music because of that. And so she took piano lessons so that she could have me around the instrument.
Wow.
And so it was through that I was able to, gain a love for not only just classical music, but also for piano. And I think by age 6, I got my first keyboard, and I was playing for churches by age 10.
Oh my goodness.
And so during that time, it was just like, a kind of like never ending, evolution of my craft as a musician. And a lot of it was self-taught in the very beginning.
Wow.
Hearing pieces and kind of picking it up by ear, because we had to do that in church for choirs. But
Right.
then it's like, oh, I want to learn these classical pieces. So I'm hearing stuff like Furley's and Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and I'd have my ears glued to like the stereo speakers trying to figure out what the chords are and so on. And eventually I was like, I'm tired of that. I need to learn to read music. And it was through learning a recorder in elementary school that I actually got a little semblance of what it's like to read music, but not in terms of the piano respect.
Yeah.
But it's been a very, very long journey. A lot of it has been a lot of ups and downs, because the resources in Jamaica at the time just was not classical focus, especially where I lived, which was in Montego Bay. I lived in Maroontown in the mountains, but that's in Montego Bay, St. James. But if you weren't in Kingston, which was basically the hub for classical music, then you never really had that access. But thankfully, we had a really amazing band program at Herbert Morrison High School. So that was where I kind of like threw a lot of my energy in just grabbing a lot that I could, and really bridging the gap, so to speak. So, I mean, it's really a very long story, but I think it's one that I don't think I would do any differently, because I see that now. I had a mindset of what my career was supposed to look like. Oh, it was supposed to be, I was supposed to enter competitions and be a concert pianist and that. And I was even more frustrated because I was like seeing 10-year-olds and 15-year-olds having careers. And I was like 19, 20 at the time. And I was like, okay, I guess forget about that. And then a lot of those competitions, I just was not ready to enter. And then by the time I was ready, the the age limit had already gone. So
Sure.
it was like, oh, what do you do? But I guess I realized that by the journey that I was taking on and the detours that I had to experience and the people that I met along the way, um, not only did they believe in my talent, but they put my name in spaces to not only grow and develop, such as like getting scholarships to study abroad, but eventually that morphed into learning how to compose and learning how to like develop that side that I never even knew existed.
Wow.
It was there just to fulfill a requirement before, but then it eventually blossomed into something that I was like, oh, I really actually like this process of creating stuff as much as learning other people's works. And
Sure.
so just the idea of being open
Yeah.
to those detours had really now put me on a trajectory in which right now I'm living the dream.
Wow.
And it's like I would have never thought that my career would actually pan out this way, but it did, and I'm so grateful.
Wow. So, in my understanding that your mom took piano lessons just in order to expose you to piano before you even took lessons yourself.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. And then you're working by the age of 10 as a church musician, uh, uh,
So
primarily.
that was primarily and again, remember the idea of having people by your side. There was this one lady who I looked up to at church, and she was this lady of a particular age at the organ, just playing the utmost. And I would, at the end of service, go up to her and just stand right there as she plays the postlude, and she would let me stay there. And eventually it kind of morphed into she would let me sit beside her on the bench while she played. And then eventually it morphed into, why don't you play the postlude for one? So and it's like it was a really nice trajectory of things. And so I loved her for that, just that exposure of having me witness all those things.
That's amazing. And this is all by ear at this point.
Yeah.
You're playing by ear. So you learn to read music by playing the recorder, but that's only treble clef, right?
Right.
So how did you learn
So
to read bass clef?
I had a science brain, and people eventually have come to realize that I actually started as a scientist. I was on my trajectory of becoming a forensic analyst,
Okay.
and I did my first degree, my undergraduate, in biological science.
Wow.
So before that, I was, all my high school track was actually science and technology, but people knew me as a musician. So they always had the two confused. They're like, aren't you a music major? I was like, no, but when they see me graduate with a science degree, they're like, but you've always been in the music room. So
Yeah.
to get back to the reading of that, so I kind of put my problem solving and science brain together. So I was like, okay, if treble clef works like this, okay, what does the bass clef work like? And then it was just like, okay, so how do I put this together? And I mean, it wasn't really efficient, because I'm not the best sight reader, but I do get along as best as I can. And it's not until I started teaching other people to read that I kind of figured, oh, that's how you do this efficiently.
Yeah.
But during that time, trying to figure things out on my own, that was my way of kind of like, saying, okay, the treble clef works like this, bass clef works like this. Okay, what happens when I put it together? And then it started to make a sense. And I was kind of coupling it with what I was hearing from, the recordings. And it was like, okay, that I think that could work.
Wow.
So that's basically how that kind of happened.
Did you ever have these silly little phrases to help remember the staff lines? Like we had one, every good boy deserves fudge.
We said favor.
That's better.
I don't, and again, I realized that was not necessarily efficient, but it did help me remember to an extent.
Yeah. I think we should write new ones. Right?
Perhaps, or maybe in the beginning we could introduce that, but then I think we'll say, okay, I think patterns are the way to go. Let's learn this as a language in terms of pattern.
Because it truly is a language. Music is a language, and yeah. It's a beautiful language, and I love that people who don't speak the same language can get together and play music. That's really stunning, and communicate in that way.
It's really amazing to hear, like, you know, people from just different cultures come in one space and start rehearsing. And even though there might be a language barrier, just by using the instrument to communicate, they're able to like detect what's needed and what they're going for and adjust accordingly. So there's so much to that, and I think it speaks to a lot of the thing, a lot about the human experience and about how we thrive through connection and how we seek to meet each other's needs through that. And so music is like this good conduit to make that happen.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's beautiful. Now, you've just done a lecture recital on cultural appropriation. Talk to me about this.
Well, that lecture recital, it's a very special project to me because for a long time, I had thought about this repertoire that they claim was so famous, you know, growing up hearing Brahms and Mozart and Beethoven. I never really thought too much about it, that there were no music from people that looked like me. And then went through all my university training, and it's not until I was on my way out, close to when I was on my way out, did I meet other people who were like, have you heard of like George Walker? Have you heard of William Grant Still? Have you heard of, you know, Brian Neighbors and you know, Bailey Holland? And I'm like, who are these people? These are people who look like me. They've been writing music all this time. And it's like, it's so interesting to realize that you've gone through so many years of formal training and none of this music is in the standard repertoire as you perceive it. Yeah. So I was like, how do I bridge this gap? But at the same time, I'm realizing that there have been a lot of cultures being used in this music that is basically standardized. So I'm like, okay.
In Mozart, in Puccini, in Verdi,
right. Everywhere. So I noticed that it was very much present in opera because it's a little more explicit because you have characters that you can actually see and you have costuming and set design. But what happens in piano music specifically? How do you detect that, and where do you find these aspects to be problematic? And so I thought that since no one really was talking about the repercussions of classical music and cultural appropriation, except for like in recent years when a lot of composers were getting flack for not giving proper credit to certain sources, such as like, you know, throat singing or the use of African drumming or so on, that really raised some eyebrows because I was like, everyone is kind of like trying to shy away from the topic, as in to say, let's not soil classical music with this thing. But I was like, what about it that's so trivial, why we cannot engage with it? But I mean, it's very prevalent in popular music. People are willing to call, you know, artists out when they're stealing works or when they find that works or certain hairstyles or certain dress is not deemed appropriate. But when it comes down to classical music, it's almost as though it's a taboo subject. So I was like, and then here comes this umbrella term of exoticism where they're like, oh, you know, it's just exotic and so on. And I'm like, I feel as though this term is almost used as a scapegoat to give permission to just do anything and it be permissible. So how can we really navigate in a way to make it very clear what are the lines and where are they blurred, and make that defined in a way, because it's very complex, it's very nuanced. And what are these levels in which we can not just try to circumvent backlash, but just use that in a way to which we can serve the people who we seek to represent properly? Because at the end of the day, these are cultures that are very sensitive, that are very rich, that are very authentic, and they come from a place of belonging. And if we just merely use them as a way of just to get a new style or just to get something that's fun or something that's just to elevate what we have, but at the end of the day, we're the one gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Then it becomes problematic because, you know, without them, we wouldn't have had anything to reference. And so we should really take the time out to respect that and do it in a way that promotes and not diminishes the value of what they have brought to the table. So I decided to see what ways in which I could make that very clear. And in also talking about not just the problems, but what are viable solutions to go around that moving forward. Because again, we can't change the past. These pieces have been in the canon for 300, 400 going on years. And so how can we really right the wrong? There's always an opportunity to rectify in the now.
Yeah.
And
well,
so
how can we, and what are those solutions? What do you think?
So a lot of that has to do with giving the people of that culture the platform to express. Because I realize that a lot of their years have been using their voice to debunk misinformation because of the damage that we've caused.
Wow.
Right? And so the energy that they could have used to be like, hey, this is what's special about our culture. They're like, oh, this is not us. This is not what we do. This is not, you know, and it's like, you'll realize that a certain style from a culture is multifaceted. There are several things that contribute to that design. And people will just take one thing and just use it and say, oh, I think this sounds exotic enough. And then they label it as something to say, you know, this is what it is. When, for example, someone used, there was this orchestral piece where someone used like a dulcimer thing and they call it Bali, right?
Right.
You know, like, is that all Bali is really? You know, there are more things to that. And you know, what research have you done? Have you consulted the people from the country? Have you consulted composers of the culture? People who are telling the native stories, doing the native dances, doing the native instrumentations? Have you consulted them to say if this is correct? You know, and by giving them opportunities and paying them appropriately for their services, not only allows them to financially support the culture, but also really gives proper due respect to what they have to offer. So you're bringing in them for lecture recitals, you're bringing in them to say, oh, this was the person who helped me to, you know, create this piece, and I would want them to talk about their culture and what it means to them and what it represents. That gives them a platform to be like, you know, this is what is so great about us. In addition to that, commissioning people of the culture to create works.
Yeah, that's the one, I think, right?
You know, it's simple as that. And I feel as though we have kind of gatekept by going for the same popular composers just because it's safe for them. And yes, while it might be financially safe because you know what you might be getting, why not request something else that's not possibly culturally appropriating?
Right.
You know, don't ask someone who is of European descent to be writing African, you know, nuanced works.
No.
If they haven't been living in the culture for quite some time to be able to engage with that. Not saying it's not possible, and not saying that they aren't allowed to do that, but they should do that with proper consultation surrounding them, just as how you would have the libretto and they have the directors and so on consulting with each other to create an opera that's, you know, that would work on stage.
Yeah.
This collaborative effort should actually go on to more cultural things.
Right.
But I know it's kind of long and winded, and you could see there's so many things to delve into, and it's very nuanced, but it's very important because at the end of the day, we want to be respected, and we want music to thrive and have longevity. And for that to happen, especially when we are infusing other cultures, because again, music does not evolve if there aren't any form of cross-pollination.
Right.
Let's make that very clear. Music never evolves if there's never any form of cross-referencing from something other than ourselves. And so this idea of human connection is not just about serving ourselves, but also preserving and perpetuating cultural heritage that has been around for, for decades. And so it can't just be about the European norms, because, it's almost bordering on the idea that tradition is all that we have. And that is not true, especially when it comes down to the classical music industry. They feel like tradition is all that we have. That's not the case. But when we are able to open up the doors to Indian culture, to African culture, to Asian culture, to Middle Eastern culture, and bring those in a way that presents them in a good light. I always reference Black Panther in this respect, because the soundtrack guy, I think he is, I'm not sure if he's from Australia, but he's from either, I think, Australia, New Zealand, and I think he went to the continent for 6 months and got African drummers and singers from the continent, recorded them playing the instruments and infused them into his orchestral soundtrack.
Wow.
And so to see that he took the time to know about their culture, went to the museums, look at the different drums, hear what they sounded like, went to the different tribes, saw what the drummings sounded like in the context and so on. Always like, I like this. I want this to be the voice of T'Challa. Whenever T'Challa comes on, this is what you hear. But it goes beyond that, because when it goes on the big screen and when you hear the music and people are able to identify themselves in what they're hearing, and then on top of that, you have the costume designers who have done their due diligence and represented the tribes in such an authentic way as well. That brings so much pride to the continent beyond anybody could even imagine. And people would think that this would be something that would fail, but this is when people see that they have been done correctly. They have been represented on such a high level that they're like, everybody needs to come see this.
Oh, yeah.
This is what we are about. And, we should not be, as a classical industry, be afraid to not just launch out in the deep just so that we can satisfy donors, but to really diversify our audience and support the people who we expect to come and see us, and do that in an authentic way, in a way that, so again, cultural appropriation is not just about, again, circumventing backlash, but yes, this is supposed to represent bringing people together. And if we talk about music being a universal language, then we have to do this properly.
Yeah, it's not about how can we do this and not get in trouble. It's about how to build bridges. And
indeed.
It's very, very important. Well, you sure hit the nail on the head with satisfying donors. That's a really tough topic. And, in opera, as you mentioned, because it is a visual art form, it's a wide open wound in this topic right now, and one that is nowhere near healed, and something I think the entire industry has had to reckon with the last 2 years as we've been on pause, because people have.
And that's unfortunate. Why does the reckoning have to happen when we are forced to confront it? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And again, it's because it's this wheel that keeps turning, because before you know it, they have to be thinking about 2 seasons in advance.
Yeah.
And so now that everything has come to a halt, they had to really sit and revamp. But I feel as though that I've realized that a lot of the smaller companies that have been behind the scenes trying to find ways in which, how can we promote works of other cultures? How can we talk about different experiences? I realized that they, during the pandemic times, managed to be thriving and sustaining themselves, because when the audience saw themselves represented on a consistent basis through the concert seasons, when the company hit hard times, they were like, well, we'll now support you because we've seen the work that you've done.
Wow.
Whereas people had been thriving on the donations that they've made and so on. And so everything has just been kind of like going fine. And they were like, okay, well, we'll figure that out when we get to that bridge, we'll cross it. But then when we came to a halt, and everything just kind of like fell by the wayside. And now they're like, oh, can you help us? Can you help us? And then people are just like, well, wait a minute, it's been, I mean, I came to this opera, but it really wasn't about me per se. And so, I mean, it was great, but I don't see me putting my money in something where I really haven't been represented, so to speak. But I mean, like, I enjoy the productions, they were great, but I don't feel compelled to give my money at this time, especially when it's really, kind of hitting hard times.
Yeah.
And so you start to see this this weighing of the balance where, was it really worth it in the end? So we have to be very diligent and realize that, it goes beyond us, and it goes beyond corporation, and it goes beyond just satisfying one thing. We have to really develop a delicate balance and ensure that what we're doing in a way that serves the community, because at the end of the day, you expect an audience to show up.
Yeah.
And
yes. And that is what nonprofit organizations are supposed to do, is to serve the community, right? All the community.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, not saying it's not possible to right the wrong, but I feel as though we've been caught in the wheel again, like a hamster, in the sense that it's working now, so let's just keep doing this. But it becomes even harder to change. But if you really push against the grain and change little by little, but it's like we're waiting to see consistency. And I see, if even a small change, but we're seeing it consistently, people will show up.
Yeah.
And we'll start to see that, they're like, they did this production last time. They did this production last time. Oh, they did this. And then when they start seeing the patterns, because people might not see things in linear form, but in hindsight, when they start recollecting ideas, they'll start to see that, they've been doing the things behind, they've been doing the work.
Yeah.
And then, eventually they'll be like, hey, I think you should go check out this production, or I think you should go check out this opera company, or I think you should go check out this artist, because they've been well represented. So let's continue to do the work. Let's continue to be intentional.
Yeah. Love it. Continue to do the work. Be intentional. Yeah. And specifics are incredibly important, not just kind of, broad strokes. You see these statements put out, and everyone's hiring a diversity officer now, which is great, but don't put up a facade. Do the work. Yeah.
Do the work.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, can I ask you some silly questions?
Sure. Yes. Let's do this.
All right. You ready?
All right. Let's go.
Okay. What is your zodiac sign?
A Virgo.
Virgo. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Beach or mountains?
Ooh.
I know.
You know what? Let me just say beach for now.
Okay. All right.
I love them both.
What's your dream vacation spot?
Dream vacation spot. Tuscany.
Oh, yeah. Gorgeous. Yeah. Okay. You can have a weekend away with any 3 people who have ever lived. Who are they?
Alfred Brendel. Who've ever lived? My mom.
Oh.
That one is hard though.
All right, it's hard.
Brahms.
All right, Brahms. Who's your favorite composer to play?
Favorite composer to play?
Yeah.
Lily Boulanger. I really love her works. My favorite composer to play, I definitely say Debussy or Lily Boulanger.
I love that. Oh yes, fabulous. Okay, you've been commissioned by any opera company you want, or all of them, to write a new opera. What is the story?
Oh wow. Now I don't like this. I don't like this is a setup.
It's a setup.
This is a setup. Okay. So that's hard. I don't know what I would, I feel I actually like this story. The playwright Gaslight. What's his name? I don't remember the name of the playwright, but it's called Gaslight.
Okay.
And this is actually the premise on which the whole term gaslighting came from.
Oh wow.
And so what happens is this couple was living in a house, and the husband would always be letting his wife feel as though she was actually going crazy, because she would express her thoughts about certain things being, not correct or so on. And he would actually leave and go to work. And of course, their house had been candlelit. And each time he would dim the lights lower and lower.
Oh.
And she would possibly notice, and he would actually tell her that she's like imagining things.
Wow.
And it was I think I'm kind of messing up the storyline, but that's the premise of that. Each time he would dim the lights, it would get dimmer and dimmer each night. Yeah. And so eventually she was like, ask him about it, like what's up with the lights, like why they're like so low. It's like, oh, you're imagining things, oh, it's not no big deal, blah blah blah. And of course he would, like, when he would leave for work, he was actually going upstairs, I think, and then she would hear these sounds of like footsteps upstairs, and she was like wondering what's going on. And I don't know, it was really a very interesting storyline, and I think I would really want to do an opera on that. But it also is a really good premise to bring awareness to this kind of psychological behavior through opera.
I mean, it sounds like
I thought would be really cool.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool.
I can't wait to be there at the premiere. Or you can cast me if you want. I'll happily be in it.
Yes, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Done. Okay. Here's a tough one. As if that one wasn't tough. You can go back in time to any moment in your life and tell your younger self in that moment one thing.
What year was that? That year was. It was like my second. It was at my second year of college when I was doing my bachelor's degree.
Pause 1 second. Hold on. Goodness, sorry, I had a delivery.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it was my second year in college doing my degree in science, and there was a teacher that came to me and basically transformed. Her name was Kimberly Khan. She came that one semester and transformed me into basically like changing my career. Making me think about having music as a long-term career, like as it was being possible. And then since then, I was kind of like, am I gonna even make it as a musician, or can I? But then again, I had it in my mind that, okay, yes, I'm gonna be a musician because I could see that it's possible. I think during that time, I was still caught up in my head about a path, or and anyway, what I would tell myself is, be kind, work hard, you'll still make it. And I mean, I guess I figured that out along the way, because I mean, look at where I am now. But I think it was a very hard psychological warfare at the time, looking at other people and kind of projecting, oh, I should have been there by a certain time, or should have had my degree by a certain time. And they're like, no, you're on your own timetable.
Yeah. Comparison's incredibly difficult, I think, for everyone. But I think especially as an artist, because you can't, no one runs a parallel course to anyone else. We're all on our own journey. And it's not a ladder that you climb. Yeah.
So yeah, I would tell myself, you're on your own timetable.
I like
It's gonna
that.
be fine.
Yeah. Okay, the final question is, what is the meaning of life?
To be seen, to be loved, to be understood. To be embraced. To be free to express your true authentic self.
Gorgeous. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been so fun to finally talk.
It's been such an honor, Zachary. You have no idea. Oh. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, a blast. And I'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yes, indeed.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for joining us. Puppies and rainbows till we meet again.